to the left, and Chelsea is 2, and you are 2. Or because last time we did it long ways.
Oh, should I do it long ways again?
Or we just moved.
But it should still be fine. Yeah, that's better. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have to introduce ourselves again.
No, I don't think so. Okay, so the last time that we met, we were covering our CBA 3 data, and the key points that we're focusing on were things like higher order thinking skills. We're focusing on reading comprehension challenges that are, especially our economically disadvantaged students and SPED students are facing, as well as our emergent bilinguals. So we touched on some of the things that we could do to help with these students who are struggling, but I kind of want to get a little bit more in depth. So what are some of the reasons why students are struggling with our higher order thinking?
I know with my inclusion students, first of all, I say with my students, I model too much, and I give them a lot of sentence stems, and I just feel like I give them a lot of extra support. And so now that's getting closer to STAR testing, and we just completed the benchmark, and I'm reviewing their SCRs and ECRs. I'm thinking I probably need to give them some additional independent work so that they can practice more on their own, and so and build up their skills.
Right.
Because they're like being dependent on
Yes.
you instead of seeing
Right.
what they can actually do. Yeah.
And it's hard for you to know where actually they need help and where they need to grow, because if you're continuously modeling for them, you're thinking, okay, everyone's great, everyone has it, and then when they do it on your own, you're like, okay, maybe everyone doesn't.
But they're getting the structure right, because when I'm looking at it,
Right.
they're following the model that I'm, modeling with them. But that coming up with their own answers and ideas and
Yeah.
everything, that's where they're struggling.
I mean, I'm guilty of doing the same thing.
Right. And I think especially if you're in an inclusion classroom where you know that you're teaching students who struggle so much, you feel like you do have to guide them so much. And sometimes those are the kids who they don't want to do anything. So you feel like if you're not at the front of the room doing it with them or for them, they're not going to do anything because they feel as though they can't.
Right.
They can't do it. Okay, so how could we shift?
I know I have them in pairs right now, and so I'm kind of like trying to wean them from just being solely dependent on me, and now trying to be dependent on each other, just in groups, too. And hopefully, in another week or so, I'm gonna make guide them into doing it independently on their own right before STAR, like the 2 weeks before STAR. So they're helping each other build those skills together, not relying only on me.
Right.
And then hopefully they will have taken the knowledge I've given them and the skills that they've learned from me and their peers, and they'll be able to do it on their own more easily when it comes to the STAR testing.
That's good. So they don't feel as though you're just completely abandoning them immediately, so they still have someone else they can rely on. That supports them. And then they can kind of see, hey, I can do this. Like, I can do this. So it also builds confidence within them.
Right.
That's good. I like that.
I'm kind of doing that now, but mine are more in the stage of working with a partner or like a small group, because I've been modeling and now I'm kind of setting them free a little bit, and so I'm seeing some of them gain that confidence already with like leading the discussion within their group and stuff, so I think that'll be good for them.
And I'm in between both of y'all.
Yeah.
Some of my classes I'm still kind of modeling too much, and so I'm gonna do like that little gradual release that you're talking about. And then the other class I am having them work in partners and share, that's more of an honors class. Because I know that most of them actually pretty much understand the whole process.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So whenever we're thinking about other students who maybe they aren't necessarily over reliant on the teacher guidance, but they're just lacking basic skills in breaking something down, what are some ways that we could help these students with their higher order thinking questions that they're just not getting it? What are some things that we as the teachers could do for them?
Like asking them open-ended questions and probing them to go further.
Right.
Yeah, kind of like you were telling us a while back about that chapter with the lizards, how you were kinda,
So yes, when, I'm just trying to make them infer and also telling them my thinking process.
Right.
But like in Holes, there's one chapter that discusses just the lizards only, and so I was just asking them, okay, wait, let's stop, close the book. Think about that for a second. Why is the author dedicating one entire chapter to the lizards? And some of them were just saying, oh, because they want us to have more description. I said, do you really? And so I would continue to kind of probe them, trying to lead them to
Right.
what it's foreshadowing.
Right.
And eventually, probably after about 5 minutes of probing, they did lead to that.
yeah,
And then I actually kind of try to boost all of their confidence in saying, because this student said this and this
Yeah.
and this and this, and I brought it to one that would lead us to the foreshadowing.
Right.
that's good.
So I mean, I think that that's some of it too, that sometimes they don't have the confidence to say it out loud.
Right, yeah, and showing how you as a teacher can break things down in your brain.
Yeah,
Because some of them, they just don't know.
I think we just get it, but
Yeah.
we also have to
We go through
do
steps.
step by step,
And
yeah.
so showing them those steps, whether it's in ELA or math or science or whatever it is so beneficial because they don't have those skills.
Yeah, and a lot of times for me on questions, like if I'm doing on the whole group, like I'll show them like, okay, if I'm taking this test, this word stood out to me and it made me connect it to this, and that's why I chose this answer. So
Mhm.
just kind of showing them even like keyword strategy is something so small that
Right,
they
right.
are able to kind of see our thought process of it.
So when we're talking about these students who are at different levels, and it can be challenging when they're in the same classroom, but for teachers who teach like inclusion or have a heavy 504 class, what are some things that you can do to support these students at different levels? I know, Lisa, you just talked about modeling your thinking out loud, which is really good. But when we're talking about actual, like we're reading and we're trying to break a text down, what are some things that y'all do to help those students understand the text better?
I know I spend a lot of time annotating the text with my students because I have EB students and inclusion. And so we look at the vocabulary words, and so if I see when I'm reading the passage, because I always read aloud to all of my students first. We do
Right.
a first read where we read aloud, and as we read aloud, we'll circle words that I think they might not understand, or I'll even ask them, is there another word that you see that you maybe don't know?
Right.
And that way, and we'll add that to the list and circle it as well.
And I think that all of us have done annotation with them.
Right.
And modeled that for them.
Right.
And we require that of them, and I think that like with, color highlighting, and even showing them how to do that on a computer, not just paper,
Right.
that helps them as well.
That does help them for sure. Okay, so shifting from this high support more towards our low support needed, so our honors kids, and because sometimes our socioeconomic students, they fall into that category,
that's
or
the
even
thing.
our EB students are in that category.
Yeah.
So what are some things that for those students in those honors classes, what can we do for him to make sure that they're really understanding these critical thinking activities?
I feel like what we're doing with our nonfiction book club, to where they are really focusing on one book, maybe a couple kids at a time, and meeting weekly and talking about just their book, and then having
Right.
a creative project and present that
Right.
information to the students that the other students in the class have not read the book. And so
Right.
they're ultimately telling them about the book and the research that they've done with it, having to present.
So like that project-based learning.
Yes.
I noticed today when some of them were doing it, that kids were like actually interested in the book that
Yeah.
they were sharing because of how excited they kind of got about it, and just showing them the little bits and pieces without completely telling the whole story. I think that was good. Also think when we had them like get in groups for book club meetings, like hearing them kind of summarize what they got from a certain chapter that
Right.
someone else also didn't get, and then
Mhm.
kind of those light bulbs going off and we're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Like, what if that does lead to this? And
Right.
those discussions were really good for my honors kids.
And a lot of times they can put the pieces better, like together better, coming from other students.
Yeah, their
From their
peers instead of
peers.
us, yeah.
And even like when I think of some of the students in my class that are reading Lion, they're actually from India and now
Yeah.
they're reading about a book about India, so it's more authentic to them and
And they can make those connections
they make
too.
those connections, yeah, for sure. Okay, so Chelsea, you talked about summarizing, and I'm glad that you said that because our next key point that our students struggled a lot with on CBA 3 was actually simply just reading comprehension, inferencing, and summarizing. So what are some things that we're showing our students in the classroom, organizers, whatever it may be, when it comes to summary? What are their techniques that we use?
Well, I know that we agreed to use the WWR, the who, what, result.
Yes.
And we modeled that with them, and then when we try to get them to do that, we noticed that they are actually adding too much detail.
Yeah.
And so trying to go back and just refine that and telling them, like, do I really need to know the color of the lizard's eyes?
Yeah.
Or do we just need to mention the lizard?
Right.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
having those conversations, making sure that they're understanding how to condense it.
Yeah, and then I think also there's some who they need to learn to condense it, but then some of them are condensing it too much.
Right.
So it's like they're just listing a W and writing the who
Yeah.
instead of like forming those sentences. So it's kind of finding that balance of, okay, once we get it into sentence form, we do need to get to just the point of what they're saying and not give all this extra
Right.
information.
So when it comes to WWR, do we feel like that acronym is good enough? Or do we feel like we need to shift from it? Is that something that's gonna work? Is that used by everybody? Also, is that used for fiction and nonfiction?
Yeah, because I know we used to use, I think it was character problem, resolution.
Yeah.
And so I think with WWR, it was easier to just do it across the board of who are we talking about, what happened, what's the result of that, and so to me, that works with fiction or nonfiction, and
So that's
something,
good.
and something
Yeah.
for my kids, like, when I tell them the who, like, it's not necessarily one person, it could be a group of people,
Right.
it could be an organization, it
Yeah.
could be,
Anything.
yeah, it could be an animal if that's the main character of the book, so, I think it's working, I think we just kinda need to stick to getting rid of that extra fluff when they're writing it
Right.
on their own, is
And
what
I
I'm
think
saying.
it's, also repetition.
Yeah.
Repetition, we need to make sure we're doing that weekly.
Yeah.
Even like, when we're reading wholes and reviewing it the next day.
Chapters and stuff.
And showing them, that's good though, and I like that it can go from fiction and nonfiction, because sometimes they learn so many different techniques
They
that they
learn,
can't
yeah,
remember them, so
everything.
having one universal summarization technique, that's very beneficial.
Yeah.
And Lisa, like you said, the quantity that you're doing it, if you're doing it weekly, that's fantastic. If you're doing it and modeling to them fiction and nonfiction and the same strategy, that's great. So are we doing it weekly? How often are we doing the summarization?
I think with mine, I've been doing it kind of like as a recap the next day after we've read.
Mhm.
So like we read a couple chapters the next day, we kind of verbally
Mhm.
summarize. I think I need to lead more into, okay, if we verbalized it, now everybody go write kind of what we just verbalized to kind of have that connection to where then I
Right.
can see, okay, for one, are they actually comprehending our discussion? And then two, are they forming the sentences
Mhm.
and using that strategy?
Right.
So I try to do mine at least a couple times a week when we're reading the novel.
And I do the same thing. In fact, one of the audios that I have to holes that I'm using with my students, the reader actually, she chooses 3 or 4 vocabulary words before she even begins the reading, and then after she does the reading of the couple of chapters, then she summarizes it. And so then I'll ask my students the following day to, as a quick write, to just write a 2-sentence summary.
That's good.
about-
Yeah, that's good, because you're getting in some sort of assessment. Okay, are they remembering it? Are they retaining it?
Information.
Are they able to summarize it and put it into their own words and writing it? I really like that, so that's good. Okay, so we've pretty much, I feel as though the strategies that y'all are talking about kind of go across the board. I hear a lot of good things, a lot of modeling, but we're working towards, since we're approaching STAR tests, giving them a little bit more independence, but still giving them some support from peers, and that's fantastic. So when we think about these gaps that we're seeing in our subgroups, so specifically our Hispanic population, what are some of the barriers that we're seeing, some of the problems that we think that they're facing, and what's the cause of that?
With my EB students, I still think it goes back to vocabulary
Right.
that they haven't been exposed to, or just things that we take for granted that happens in our culture that we naturally just assume that they have heard about or know
Right.
about, and they
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then,
I think we need to be more conscientious about building the background of
Right.
anything that we're teaching or talking about.
Right. We shouldn't assume that
Right.
they
So
know
they know.
what it is.
Yeah. And I think even finding like visuals for them, like I have kids sometimes, which I know is just they want to get their computer out, but I have a lot of them that are like, can I look up a picture of what that looks like? Like I've never
Exactly.
seen one before, and instead of being like, no, you don't need to get on your Chromebook, like they actually should, and
yeah.
put it on the board and kind of talk about like this is what that looks like, because some of them have never seen
I'm the
whatever
same
the
way.
topic is,
Some
and
of
so,
them
yeah,
Not
knowledge.
emergent bilinguals.
yeah,
the
yeah,
same way.
just to see that visual,
Yeah.
kind of get an idea.
And I think that, for emergent bilinguals, that's great. Yes, the vocabulary, yes, the visuals,
Mhm.
giving them those sentence stems that sometimes, because they just don't even know how to start.
Yeah,
And a lot of the times, these are some of our brightest students, but it's just, they lack the confidence of putting it into words.
Yeah.
But I think that parallels so well, though, with our struggling readers in
Mhm.
general. They need
The
just like
visuals.
they need the visuals.
Yeah.
They need the sentence stem, because the hardest part is just starting. So, like I said, so those of you who teach EB students, do you have access to resources like visuals besides the Chromebook, sentence stems? I know I remember being in trainings for emergent bilinguals, and they give us, do they give us the pictures with the Spanish word and the English word underneath it? Is that something that general ed teachers have access to, or is that specifically for ESL teachers? Like just that teacher?
Honestly, I think that would be a great question to
Yeah.
ask,
Yeah.
because I have not had access to
Right.
something like
Yeah.
that.
I think it is like our ESL.
Like more,
Yeah.
or like teachers who are teaching TELPAS.
Yeah.
And I'm
Right.
thinking it's also more so in elementary.
One thing, like with the way that our population here at our campus is
Right.
becoming more diverse,
Yeah, the
I
shift.
think that would be something
That'd be good.
that would be beneficial.
Someone can bring.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, Lisa, you teach the most emergent bilingual students, or is it Nicole? It's you. Okay, so just having that in your room.
Yeah, just
Could
have
be-
access to it.
yes, because right now they're going to RTI.
Right.
To have that additional support,
Mm-hmm.
and so Ms. Young is working with them on.
Seeing, in the RTIs, Heather Matt might not have those. She
Yeah.
might have something
She
like
might.
that.
She
I'm
might.
not 100% sure.
What I think though about that, if they're using it when they go to see her, they also need it when they're
In
in
the
your
classroom.
room.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they need to have access to that to make sure that we're keeping that consistent.
Yeah. Even if they had
memories.
something like manipulative for them to use, like in their
Yeah,
binder
binder.
or their journal.
But
of
you know,
some
and
sort.
honestly, that's not just to me, that would be beneficial
For a lot of kids.
all kids,
Yeah.
especially,
Right.
and also SPED kids.
Yeah, our lower.
Because they get content support anyway as an accommodation
Yeah,
on
they
the
do.
test, so we
Yeah.
should be able to have something like that in the classroom.
That would be great.
I like that idea. Okay, so we're talking about emergent bilinguals. The last thing I want to touch on though is our instructional strategies and our support. And I think right now we're showing a good representation of how we increase collaboration amongst teachers. What are some things that we do here at MSN that increase our collaboration?
I know, because I'm new this year, that the whole team has been very helpful in sharing their slides with me.
Right.
And so it shares their resources, because I don't have the same resources that you all
Right,
have
that we
used in the
use.
classroom and
Exactly.
everything. So that has been very beneficial for me.
Yeah, I think having that shared Google Drive, the
Yeah.
folders and stuff that we use, and then, like she said, sharing those, I think that helps as far as collaborating
And also, whenever we meet for our PLCs.
Yeah.
And we're doing our lesson planning, making our lessons, we link all of our
Everything,
lessons
yeah.
inside, and that's when we discuss like, hey, this strategy worked for me, or I'm doing this, can y'all help me?
Yeah.
And us having the conversations.
I think having the sections on our lesson plans of like, this is for inclusion,
Yes.
like an alternative,
Yes,
if
I
this is
agree.
too difficult
Yes.
or too simple for honors even, like we
Yes.
have those sections, I think that helps with ideas too, because sometimes you could use something for your inclusion class that I didn't know
Right.
about. I'm like, oh my gosh, my on level's struggling with this. This would be
Right,
great for
right.
them to use. So I think that helps.
And I mean, I think that's something else that helps, not just with students, but as us as teachers being successful, is that we're all willing to share.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
all
right.
feel comfortable with one another.
Yeah.
So
We're
that
not afraid to
open
ask
communication.
questions.
Being a
Yes.
team. Yeah.
So it truly is like a team environment. So open communication and accessibility to the Google Drive and to the lesson plans are key things that help us be successful. So thank you so much for being in my video, and that's it.
All right.